Hello, learners. Hope you are keeping well and enjoying your geography at grade 12 level or any other level. All right, because it's such a lovely subject. Today, we're focusing on the paragraph question. All right, and obviously, we don't want you to end off like this little guy here who seems to be struggling with all the questions in front of him. You can see that face there. We don't want you to look like that. Okay. My intention today is to make you look like this when you're writing your exams or your tests or your informal assessments in the class. This request has been made by you in terms of challenges facing with the paragraph question. So let's get going. All right. Now, factors to consider when you answering a paragraph question. I'm going to move my face a bit more. All right. When you're answering a paragraph question. Okay. Now, one of the things is the action words, sometimes known as the verb, the commanding word, the instructional verb, all right, where it actually tells you to explain or to list or to explain how, all right? That is one of the things that you need to look at. And notice my highlighting. You must highlight in the papers also. I call the next one the adjective. Okay, I'm going to go into more detail on these things as we go through the presentation today. Okay, so if you look at the adjective, sometimes it says economic factor. All right, so you have to focus on one specific thing. All right, and then the context. Okay, your question may relate to, like for instance, explain how building density increases the temperature in an urban area. Now, you can't just talk generally. You can't talk about the amount of motor vehicles in the urban area. You can't talk about the amount of people. You can't talk about various other factors. You have to talk about the buildings. All right. So that's putting it into context. So these three things are very important, and obviously highlighting them as we will go through. I want you to get away from the misconception. Many learners actually get the impression that, whoa, paragraph questions, nah, I'm not going to answer them. They are too high order questions and they are too or high order and very difficult. I'll never be able to get marks. That is totally incorrect thinking. All right. So an example, look at this one. In a paragraph of approximately 8 lines, explain how cold front occlusion developed. Okay, now what you need to focus on, the yes things that you must do, right? Of course, each of the two questions in both your papers, the theory parts, have two paragraph or one paragraph question each. My apologies. All right, so they consist of 8 marks. So question 1 will have a paragraph question. Question 2 will have a paragraph question in paper 1 and paper 2. So you're talking 16 marks for each paper will be on a paragraph question. All right. Of course, you will require insight and analytical thinking skills. Sounds very big. What we're saying is your understanding of the content. Okay, you can't just go and rote learn or just learn off by heart without understanding. So they sound like very complicated words, but if you can understand your work and then apply it to a question that asks you a little more detail, you will be able to answer it. Remember, geography is not a rote learning subject. You can't learn off your notes, including any stains on the page, and you know your notes off by heart and don't understand it. You will never do well in geography. All right. Another thing we know, it's full sentences. Okay. You can't write short, just point. You understand? It has to be full sentences. But not to stress, I'm going to go through a few as we go through this. Write as a paragraph. Now, please do not assume that this paragraph is something very challenging. I'll have to put an introduction and a conclusion. No, no, no. It's 4 points that you need, 2 marks each. It's 4 fully explained points in one paragraph. No introduction, no conclusion, anything like an essay. It's not an essay. All right? It's just 4 points. So, how would we do the 4 points? Not to stress. Let's take this question. All right? If we look at it, it asks how the cold front developed. We say, for instance, here, a cold front moves faster and undercuts and overtakes the warm front. Okay, that's one of the steps that are involved, because a cold front comes in and it undercuts and forces the warm air up, right? I'm not going to deal so much with the content and explanation of the different content. It's all in my presentations. If you go through to mid-latitude cyclones, you will find that, in fact, the whole presentation is not explaining content, because you've got that in my other presentations. It's about the question, okay? The paragraph question. So I'm showing you a full answer, okay? Now, what do? I put in a full stop. That tells me it's 1 point. And if my block was bigger, I would have taken this and put it there. So it's not separate points. It's all in a paragraph. After you put in your full stop, you go to the next point. All right. The warm air is forced to rise, resulting in the narrowing of the warm sector. Okay. So it tells you that. That's your next point. And then I continue until I write 4 points. After each point, you put a full stop and you continue after the full stop. Like, as I said, if this was the full stop and I had space here, the da would have went there, okay, and it would continue in a paragraph. Once you've got your 4 fully explained points, you understand, you've now have a paragraph, and each point is worth 2 marks. So that's about it, learners. 4 points in a paragraph, all right? And don't separate them in point form. Full stop and you continue. I'm sorry I'm emphasizing this, but it's very important. Full stop and you continue. One thing you must notice, do not look at the marking guidelines that you will have available on your DBE website, or your teachers will give you past papers. Those marking guidelines are in point form. It's for the marker marking your papers. So it makes it easier for that marker to look at the different points and to give it to you, or mark correctly, and then check if you have all the answers, etc. What is a no? A no is a paragraph question may not be answered in point form. Look at this. The same one. The cold front is moving faster and undercuts and overtakes the warm front. Full stop. Then if there was space here, you should have went there. But then you leave and you write the next point. The warm air is forced to rise, resulting in the narrowing of a warm sector. It's in point form. No, you cannot do that. All right. A second thing is that some learners write in bullet form. You cannot write in bullet form. You can't put a bullet sign and then continue and put another bullet. Avoid bullets, avoid in point form, but put it in a paragraph. Okay, remember, as I said, if there was space here, I would have moved the da and the warm air and then continued as I was doing it there. All right. Another thing is a no. And that is why you need to understand your work and practice your paragraph questions. Take it back to your teachers. Let them check it for you. You understand, to see whether you have the full answer. Now look at this answer. It says explain how here. All right. The cold front occlusion developed. Right. So it has to have a full answer. Now, if I take an answer like this, the cold, let's say if the word front was here also, I think I've mislaid or did not put it in. The cold front overtakes the warm front. That's a vague answer. What happens for the cold front to overtake the warm front? All right, it's moving faster. Remember, always I've told you, you're explaining something to someone who doesn't have a full understanding. Whenever you write your papers, say to yourself, you're explaining to someone who doesn't have a fully understanding of geography and will have a little better understanding if you explain it to them. We want to ask you how or what causes the cold front to overtake the warm front. And this part is missing. The cold front, which is moving faster, overtakes the warm front. So vague answers, no, not acceptable. Always ask yourself, am I saying why the cold front will overtake the warm front? What makes it do that? Oh, it moves faster. Then you give a full answer. Okay, learners, so these are the no-nos that you must never, ever do. All right? Then there are action words, as I told you. The action words will tell you what to do. Okay? Like here we've got all the words. Describe how. Explain. Evaluate. All right? Explain why. Discuss. I've got discuss twice. Whoa, I like the word discuss. Provide. Account. Explain how, suggest why. And remember, the words will change. I can also have describe how or suggest how, whatever. Read the command words. That will tell you what type of answer you will need. All right? Can you see action verb and the linking verb? Makes a very romantic couple, eh? All right, I'll talk about the linking verb, etc. later. All right, in your exam guideline, at the end, there is a list of the words, the sort of description of what is required and how you write them. Okay, so if you look at account, to answer for, explain the cause of, explain why. All right. Analyze, to examine something. Okay, critically analyze, examine. Is it a good tropical cyclones, good or bad? Why? You understand? That is important. Okay. Describe. List the main characteristics. Remember, all these are in full sentences, right? Describe the impact of tropical cyclones on the East Coast, all right? Oh, you can put in things like flooding will cause more soil erosion if it's dealing with the area. You understand? Or is dealing with the physical characteristics. Evaluate also, make an appraisal, an opinion concerning the value. Is mid-latitude cyclones good for agriculture. All right. And it can be good or bad, isn't it? It brings rain or it can bring floods. All right. And flood the crops. Explain. You're making things clearer. Like that one. Why? If you look at the point of how does the cold front overtake the warm front? All right. You have to explain it to make it clearer. Clearer meaning that, whoa, it moves faster. And then that is the reason why it overtakes the warm front. So it needs a little more than just a statement. Okay, that is why it's explained. Recommend, we have advise. You have those ones where you recommend strategies to overcome challenges facing informal settlements. Okay, suggest, you propose or explain solutions, suggest possible strategies, all right, to reduce the challenges the informal settlement is facing. Maybe have more roads, having electricity, etc. How? What way or manner? You understand? How does the tropical cyclone impact, all right, on maybe, again, I'm using the coastline. Oh, it causes soil erosion. And if it's physical characteristics, it drowns wildlife, damages natural vegetation. Why? Why would you consider a tropical cyclone to be devastating? Oh, because it causes floods, all right, which damages roads, damages infrastructure, damages the coastal regions, causing erosion again. Explain why, all right, to make known in detail. It's like the account question. Explain why. All these things are full answers, full sentences. But this one also, like in account and things like that, it also has an explanation and a qualifier. I call it the factor or explanation and qualifier. Like, for instance, I'm going to go back here. I got another example also. The cold front moves faster. Okay, that's a factor. And what does it do after that? It undercuts and overtakes the warm front. That's the qualifier. Okay, but I'll do one again just now because that is very, very important. Same with the explain how, to make known in detail how something takes place. All right, like how the occlusion takes place, all right, in detail. So it also has to have an explanation of factor and qualifier. Don't forget that. Practice, practice, practice. I know learners I work with, I walk into a class and I say, what are the two things? Explain now. Factor, qualifier. Give me an example. And you keep doing that, learners. It'll make a big difference. All right. Provide is give suggestions, strategies. All right. Provide strategies. It can be phrased like that. Let's go back to the informal settlement. Provide strategies that will reduce the challenges faced by the informal sector. Okay. So you can talk about all those factors again, providing proper sanitation, etc. One important thing is it may sound like recommend, describe, provide, but all of them have full sentences. Don't forget that, learners. All right. Now, we spoke about the adjective, eh? Remember, when you're writing, that is why it's important to take your highlighter. You notice I like my highlighter and I like yellow highlighters. I don't know why, but I like it. All right. Sometimes one of the problems is that many of us have selective reading. All right. So instead of reading the social factor, we read the factor. Okay. And what happens? We give general factors, and it may not be social. Social dealing with the people, education, all right, all those aspects, okay, health. Okay, so you have to focus your answer on that. In this case, it is the social factor or the economic factor, which is dealing with wealth, etc., the different economic sectors, trade, all right, all those things. So your answers must be specific to that. Or, and I want to emphasize this, learners, any of these words, I know you study different subjects, and environmental could relate to the human-made environment, etc. in some subjects. Remember, in geography, environmental is the natural, physical is the natural. Natural on its own, obviously, is the natural. All right, so adjectives, I call them. It may be called some other terms, all right, by the English teachers, right? And I apologize to them. I call it the adjective, which is very important in terms of answering your questions, okay? Then the demands of a paragraph question. Remember, it's middle to high order questions. It's not your low order questions, but it's still manageable. Remember, it can be middle or high order, but it doesn't have to be difficult. Or it can be. There will be certain challenging questions, but you attempt all. You understand? You watch my finger, attempt all. All right. And you'll see you will get your marks. All right. If you do study well and smart. All right. Of course, as I said, they require insight and thinking skills. They require full sentences. I spoke about the action words, all right, and the adjectives that will determine the demand of the exam guideline. No vague answers. Look at the social, economic, environmental factors. All make the difference. And you make silly errors, learners, when you just look at the word factor. Some questions require factor and explanation, or factor explanation and a qualifier. Like, for instance, explain how berg wind conditions impact on the physical environment. All right, can you see it? First, it's about berg winds, and it's explain how, not just list factors, or at list impacts. You understand? It's explain how. Difference, eh? All right, the impact on the physical environment. Can I talk about the human impact? No, 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 no. It's specific to the physical environment. And that's what we need to learn. So this question must have two things. Remember what we said earlier? It needs a detailed explanation. So I would go, oh, what happens? Plants or natural vegetation dry out. Can you see it? Right? My factor explanation. What happens due to what? Due to the hot, dry winds. Can you see it? You look at the berg winds and you look at the natural environment. The berg winds are hot, dry winds. All right? And what does it do? It causes plants or natural vegetation or pasture to dry out. That's an impact on the natural. So if I'm talking to the person who doesn't have a good skill of geography, who doesn't have as much knowledge of geography as you guys have, because you are very intelligent, all right, so they will know, oh, berg winds are hot, dry winds, and therefore they'll dry out the vegetation. It brings out an understanding, all right? The declining of ecosystems, all right, because natural vegetation is dying, will disrupt food chains and food webs. Can you see? The factor or explanation and the qualifier, all right, is needed. All right, learners, and then the value of paragraph. Don't just look at paragraph being 16 marks per paper. You understand? Look at the value, because it asks for detailed, comprehensive answers. It does summarize topics and sections. You understand that you can get a better understanding of the section. You can apply it. Now I've got a better understanding about mid-latitude cyclones, because asking you the impact of mid-latitudes, I'm getting a better understanding of informal settlements, because if I know strategies of how to handle challenges faced by the informal sector, then I have to have an understanding of what are the challenges, what is an informal settlement, you understand? And then I have to look at strategies. Can you see? So it summarizes a section and gives you for you to answer this. So if you successfully answering paragraph questions, then you will do well, because you have to have an understanding of the content before you answer this. It also links topics or sections, right? I can talk about traffic congestion, okay, and its impacts. I can talk about strategies to reduce it. We can use more or less the same concepts of reducing the impact of peat islands, for instance, have more public transport, etc. So we can overlap. Sometimes we overlap things like you'll do these sections later: small scale farming, food security, all right? And we can take the product. I think last year or the year before, we had beef farming. How can it be done? So we can take 3, 4 sections and link them. And that's another important thing about geography. You have to link sections. And I'm sure your teachers are telling you about this, that you can get 3 or 4 little topics or sometimes sections in one, like for instance, economic geography or rural and urban settlements. And in that section, we can link a few things together. All right. It allows you to practice instructional verbs, which are found there, and approximately 75% of the paper is dealing not just, of course, everywhere there's an instructional verb, but of the application instructional verbs. You understand? So I'm going to correct that. My apologies. Of the real application questions, 75% or more is found in the paper. Go through some past papers and you'll see that. So you're practicing that, all right? And it assists you with other application questions, okay? So very, very important, because in other questions, all 2-mark questions will use these instructional verbs, all right? Explain how, why, explain, describe. So you're practicing for a big whole chunk of that paper. So paragraph questions, you can see, are very important, all right? Now what I'm going to do, learners, is go through some questions, all right? But I'm not going to go through all the answers in the marking guideline. I'm going to go through a few just to give you an idea of what's actually needed. Now, one thing I want to say, I'm lifting my finger up. I tell learners who I work with more regularly is that don't just look at that. If you can, it's to secure your mark. Sometimes there's uncertainty, all right? Give it a full answer. And if you want to give a factor and a qualifier, give it as it is. I say, because sometimes a described question may not ask you for a full answer, like in more so detailed, like an explain how. But if you can give it, give it. It secures your marks. All right. I tell learners that. All right. But as I'm going to go through, I'm going to look at the words and what we expect. All right. Let's take the first type of question. The emphasis here, describe how. So describing, you looking here, and remember your action word. you explaining here in terms of looking what conditions are there. And if I go to the word describe, I'm sorry, I'm going up again, right? List the main characteristics of something, give an account for. Okay, so I'm going to go here. Now, watch here, learners. I'm putting it into context, how the position of the inversion layer, all right? It's about the position of the inversion layer. Can you see where it's situated? So it focuses on the position of the inversion layer and not just general, okay? Right, and then it says in sketches A and B. So your answer has to have a description of both A and B. Otherwise, you're not going to get your full marks. You're never going to get it like that, all right? Influences the amount of rainfall in the, and look at this, in the interior of South Africa. Can you see that analytical skill, interpretation? So it may be described, but there's specific things, the position of the inversion layer, sketch A and B, okay? So I must look at both sketches, and it focuses on rainfall and not other forms of precipitation. And also, it doesn't focus on the whole of South Africa, the interior of South Africa. And that is why practicing these questions, after you practice and practice and practice, learners, it's going to become so easy for you. You understand? No matter about the challenges, you will be able to manage. So let's look at this, right? Because it's a describe, I wonder what sign is that? All right, because it's a described question, okay, you can, your answers won't be as, it's still full sentences, all right, but it won't be as the full explain how question. So inversion layer is above the level of the plateau. You notice that, eh? In sketch A. Can you see it? Above the level. So what does it do next? It allows moist air to flow into the interior. Can you see I'm also using my sketch in this case? Can you see the warm moist air coming in? So not all cases, some may be taking it a level higher and may not be in the sketch, but sometimes it is. So examining the sketch also can help you look at paragraph questions. Can you see it? All right. Then unstable air conditions cause air to rise. All right. So as air rises, it cools, condenses, and forms clouds. Of course, it results in more rainfall. All right. And sketch B, what do we look at here? Inversion layer is below the level of the plateau or escarpment. There's my point. What does it do next? Moist air cannot reach the interior. Can you see it? It's now not reaching the interior. Can you see how my sketch is helping me? Right. Stable conditions cause clear skies. Right. Because it's winter in those conditions, there's more subsiding air. So it's going to cause clear skies, subsiding air heats up. All right. So there's less or no condensation, results in less or no rainfall. Can you see? So if I've got 4 of these factors, I will get my 8 marks, but it must include sketch A and B. Can you see? Not a very difficult question, all right? It's middle order, but you have to interpret the question, okay? Right, let's look at another one. Right, now I'm not going to go through all the answers, but it says describe the processes, okay? The processes, another word, can you see it? Processes tells you it can be in any order, but I'm not recommending any order. You do it step by step. Like you don't say, I go to school. I ask you steps you do in the morning. I go to school. And then you write after that, I brush my teeth. And then you write, I start learning in class, and then I eat my breakfast. Even if it says processes, you try and put it in order, okay? But if you can't, processes mean that. But process has to have your answers in the correct steps, all right? So processes that resulted in the change of fluvial landform from A to D, all right? A obviously is a meander, and how it became an oxbow lake, all right? And that is D, which is an oxbow lake. So you explain the processes, all right? Now, describe. So let's look at some of the answers, all right? The outer bank gets eroded. Obviously, you know that from your geomorphology. Deposition in the inner bank, because it's a described question. Then continuous erosion and deposition cause the neck to become narrower. Can you see the steps? It's the process of how it changes from there. The meander loop develops, okay? I notice in this sort of question, when you analyze, learners wrote all the points fully. You understand, but 4 points is sufficient. But I would suggest, even if it says processes, you write them in order. Okay, can you see? That's a described question. All right. Then suggest another word. And I go back to the exam guideline. All right. I hope I've got suggest here, and I got it. Propose, to propose an explanation or solution. All right. Suggest measures. Can you see it? To prevent flood-related disasters. What is the question focusing on? Flood-related. Can you see the context, learners? Flood-related. It's not just other things. It's related to floods. All right? As the article would have showed you. I know you're going through your past papers. In informal settlements, not just flood-related disasters for anything like farming, etc. It focuses on informal settlements, all right? So your answer must be specific to that, all right? Let's look at it. Can you see? Informal settlements should be relocated to higher lying areas. It's related to floods, because if you take them to higher lying areas, there's less chance of being impacted. Can you see it? Adequate services should be provided for informal settlements, all right? Like proper drainage, instead of having these little lakes or whatever, or sources, proper water supply, emergency services, if something goes wrong, you understand? All those things. Then we've got efficient drainage system should be installed. Your drainage system in terms going, I call it the manhole. You go into your little slip-offs, the water flows out instead of standing there. So water drains into the drainage systems, etc., which will reduce flooding. All right. Provide stronger building material. Okay, so that houses won't just get damaged easily. But you can see what I'm talking about here. It's all related to flood-related disasters, your measures that can be happen. So it's not as detailed as you explain how, but it gives a full sentence with a full answer. But remember, I say, do it fully. It won't take you much longer. Put it as a full thing. You understand? High areas, less chance of flooding. You understand? Adequate services provided to informal settlements, like emergency services. If you want to put a little more, put it. You understand? Doesn't hurt. If you write very slowly, obviously, then you go with these answers. Okay, but it's suggest. Let's look at the next one. Suggest I'm just going to do one more suggest, more because the context suggests sustainable building strategies to reduce urban heat island effect. You know the urban heat island effect, all right? You know it. You know what happens there. You know what causes urban heat islands, etc. All right. But this question is talking about sustainable, which is long term, right? That can be used and it can last, and it focuses on building strategies, not anything else, but the buildings itself, not the people, but the buildings, not the motor vehicles, but the buildings. Look this again. What does it say here? And it suggests, it's not explained now. Paint roofs or buildings with light colors. That's a building strategy. Develop rooftop gardens, a building strategy. Replace tar and concrete with cobblestones. You understand that actually is a building strategy. Minimize large glass windows. Can you see what I'm saying here? It's a building strategy. It focuses on the building. The context is the building. I'm not going to go through all the answers. Now look at this one. The word provide strategies. Okay? Can you see it? Provide also is giving. All right. More rooftop, plant more trees to absorb carbon dioxide. It's a green strategy. Can you see it? All right. So it deals with planting, etc. All right. Okay, I'm just going to put in the wrong slide. Establish rooftop gardens. Can you see it? Create parks and green belts in urban areas. Reduce carbon emissions by making use of solar energy. Can you see it is about green strategies? It must focus on green strategies, environmental strategies, which is dealing with that, because a green strategy, all right, are sustainable, do not harm the environment. Sometimes there will be words that you're not totally used to and may not cover. If these words are used, an explanation will be found in the source. Please note that, I've noticed this sort of trend that explanations are supplied in the source. Let's take an explain question, a more detailed answer. Explain. And this question again, watch for the words positive impact of land reform. Of course, you must be doing it at the moment where it talks about producing, giving people access to land, etc. All right. So look at this question. Explain the positive impact land reform. So it's positive. It's about land reform will have on rural communities. Can you see what a paragraph question does and why it's important? So it's an explanation. It's a positive impact, not negative. So it's specific and it deals with land reform. It doesn't deal with the general communities. It focuses on the rural community. So let's look at an explained question. Can you see? Landless people in rural areas will now be able to own land. Can you see? It was landless people in the rural areas. Can you see it's focusing? People didn't have land, will now be able to own land. Is that a positive impact? But it's a fully explained one. Let's take now. All right. Because of land reform, more people in the rural area will be able to practice farming because they got more land. All right. They will be able to provide food for themselves through the farming. All right. Remember, it's a paragraph question. If you've written about farming, okay, then you can say that people will be able to afford more food. But if you haven't written about farming, then you say due to more farming, people will be able to provide food for themselves and their family. Please note that point. So here, because farming has been written, you don't have to write farming in the next one if it's following this pattern. But if it's not, due to more farming, people will be able to provide more food for themselves. All right? And you see, people will earn an income for themselves because they're practicing farming, and it will alleviate poverty. So it demands a more comprehensive answer. In fact, I would say factor qualifier in this one also. Factor qualifier. Do the explain questions with a factor qualifier. All right, to make sure you get the marks. Now, learners, I know you may say, but it's not this requirement or that requirement. I'm saying do the factor qualifier to guarantee your marks so that you know you gave a comprehensive answer. Let's look at another one. Explain 4 strategies, solutions that could be implemented so that the Olifants River becomes a sustainable source of water. All right, it's about the Olifants, it's about catchment areas and what can be done. So 4, it's explained 4. Watch the answer for this. Create a buffer zone to prevent development too close to the river. Can you see? There's a factor qualifier here. Make do it that way. You understand? Because it's giving the full explanation, the demand of an explanation question. Implement legislation factor to discourage pollution of the river, laws that prevent people. Issue fines for illegal dumping and polluting of the river. Monitor and test the quality of water to ensure suitable domestic and industrial use. Can you see it? Put in your factor and qualifier, but also in context to the catchment area. Now, another one, explain the physical characteristics or impact of flooding on floodplains. All right, another explain. It involves the physical, all right? It's not the human impact, because many people were writing, notice were writing on farming, etc. It's a physical, the natural impact of flooding on the floodplain. All right, let's look at this one. Can you see? Deposition of silt increases the width of the floodplain, physical characteristics. Deposition of fertile soils, all right, improves the nature and amount of vegetation, physical factor. More fertile soil, more vegetation will grow. Deposition of alluvium, which is rich soils, increases quality of soil. Right? Can you see it? So it's a factor and a qualifier. Do it for the explained questions, which demands a full explanation. Now, explaining the negative impacts. I'm going to do one more here. Okay, the negative impacts of cold fronts on tourism in Cape Town. Notice these paragraph questions. It brings it into specific context on most time. You can't just talk about the negative impacts of cold fronts, but it's on tourism. Can you see? Heavy rain will make tourist destinations inaccessible. Factor qualifier. Rock falls and landslide will decrease accessibilities. All right. Rough seas and high waves will decrease. In fact, you're scoring in this question, the qualifiers about accessibility. All right. Rough seas decrease business for tour operators. Notice everything is on tourism. Okay. I don't want to make it too long. I don't want to use all your data. All right, so I'm going to go through a few examples. I know data is expensive. Right, look at this. Explain how. As in explain questions, I'm saying factor qualify you. Yeah, it's a must. Also, explain how. Berg wind conditions, which is a hot wind, impact on the physical environment. Not just any environment, the physical environment. Can you see it? Specific context, all right? And adjective, okay? Can you see? There, I did one like this earlier on to give an example. Plants dry out. Factor, explanation. due to hot, dry winds, qualifier. Reduction in biodiversity, right, within the natural environment because of that. Declining ecosystems because of lack of vegetation will disrupt food chains and food webs. High evaporation, what does it do? Reduces soil moisture content. All right. Increased soil loss of moisture will accelerate soil erosion. Can you see what does increased soil moisture, loss of soil moisture? You understand? Will accelerate soil erosion. Factor, qualifier. But I just didn't write loss of moisture. I said increase loss of moisture. So I'm giving full explanations, learners. All right. Let's take another one. Explain how. You understand? High pressure cell A and low pressure cell B, a low pressure cell in the interior, contribute to increased rainfall in the eastern half. So it's this low, the thermal low, and the South Indian high. All right. How does it contribute to rainfall on the eastern half during summer? Can you see? Because that's when the low, intense lows are here over the land. All right. And of course, it tells you that this is quite far. It's got a greater fetch to come in here, which means it covers more ocean, brings in more water, all right, into the area. Let's look at some answers. The South Indian is further south, away from the land. Onshore winds from the South Indian high have a larger fetch, means it's further down. So the South Indian high will cover more ocean. Can you see factor, qualifier? Okay, you got that, learners? I'm going to go into a little bit more. Now it's explain how a meander develops into an oxbow lake. I think I'm repeating the slide, the processes, but you know the same thing, eh? It flows faster, right? The other one was describe, okay? But here, factor, qualifier. Flows faster, causes erosion or undercutting of the outer bank, all right? Can you see it? River deposits material on the inner bank. Meander neck narrows due to continuous erosion and factor, qualifier. Can you see? The neck is broken through due to heavy rainfall, flooding, or increase. Factor, qualifier. I'm trying to drum it into your heads so you don't forget that. All right? Discuss. I may not have it on my table there. Discuss requires a full explanation. Okay? It's factors, qualifiers, everything. You need to have a full explanation. Discuss how river capture will have a positive impact of farming at W. Can you see? There's the capital stream here. All right, you can use the diagram. Can you see? Sometimes your paragraph questions relate directly to the diagram. So questions before this will assist you. And that's another point we need to look at. In some questions, we notice that the questions flow. And for you to answer the paragraph question, you'll have to get an understanding, and it assists you also by answering the other questions to come to this. Obviously, you will be focusing on the captive stream and the captured stream. So in this case, this is the captive stream. So stream W is going to have more water. Okay, what positive impact it will have on farming? Can you see? Discuss how. Now, comprehensive answer would discuss. There'll be more water at W, right? Because the captive stream has added the water in, available for farming. Can you see? Silt will be deposited on the floodplains because of more water. There'll be flooding, resulting in more fertile soil. Can you see it? All those things increase farming now. Due to that, will increase employment opportunities. right? Increased production will result in increased or greater profits. Factor, qualifier. Okay, learners, right? There's a discuss also unfavorable environmental conditions caused by urban sprawl, the formless expansion of the CBD, all right? What unfavorable environmental conditions? Can you see it, learners? It's not just conditions, but environmental conditions. Okay, 8 lines, approximately 8 lines. I know some of you have very tiny writing. I forgot to mention this, where it needs remote sensing to pick up your writing and then zooming in. Or some of you have large writing, it can be seen from outer space. And some of you have bad writing like me, eh? I hope you don't have that. Improve your writing. All right, so it may take a little more lines or it takes less lines. As long as you got 4 fully explained points, you will be fine. All right. So look at, have I done the job? Have I discussed properly? Have I explained properly? And if it's 7 lines, it's fine as long as you got 4 points. If it went a little more because you write big, you understand, it's okay as long as you got a minimum 4 points at least. You understand that 4 points should give you the marks. I'm sorry, I'm using the word minimum because I know some of you go write a whole page with 10 points and then you don't finish the paper. Okay, look. So what does it do when the urban area grows formlessly? Influx of motor vehicles, increase pollution. Can you see it? How does urban sprawl create environmental? Industries may go into the areas as they move out. So decentralized industries attributes to global warming. Increase in population in the outskirts adds to noise and land pollution. Industrial dumping waste in the nearby rivers result in river pollution. Can you see? It's all in there, okay? So it's not difficult questions, all right? One more I'm going to do. I'm enjoying myself, all right? Explain why now, the causes of it, etc. Okay, so how, why? Can you see it? How does it happen? Why does it happen? But it's explain why. The CBD is no longer an attractive location for many businesses. Not just for people, for many businesses. Can you see the difference? For many businesses. So it's related to the business. And you know your work, learners. It's about practicing and applying it. All right. High rentals in the CBD force businesses to relocate to other commercial areas with lower and more space, like your OBDs, etc. You understand? They go out because of more space, etc. Landlord owners do not refurbish or maintain the buildings. All right, forces business to relocate more to other parts. Can you see of the city? Can you see factor, qualifier? Right, CBD becomes more susceptible to crime and discourages customers. Again, factor, qualifier. No customers, business is not there. Right? Okay, large number of informal traders is unattractive for businesses. Okay, so businesses now are losing money. All right, expect you to write this, learners, but you must put in the factor and the qualifier. So traffic congestion forces people to shop elsewhere, right? And this decreases businesses. Okay, learners, I'm explain to you the various things. Go practice, consult with your teachers. You understand? Uh, check your answers with your teachers to see whether you've answered everything correctly. Remember, you do well in paragraph questions and you understand the action verbs or the instructional verbs, and you understand the adjectives, you know what context to be putting it into. If you can answer these questions, you'll be able to answer any other question. So the value of this is tremendous. Do as many paragraph questions as you want. Each time your teacher is teaching you a section, ask for a paragraph question on that section. I know learners that I work with, they call me Mr. Paragraph sometimes, all right, because of the amount of paragraphs that I keep throwing, and it gives them a better understanding of each little topic. All right. I hope this lesson, I'm sure it would have been of value, and it's going to add to that symbol that you're going to get. All right. It's going to jump a symbol. Keep practicing, learners. Keep working on your geography. Don't leave it and assume that at the end of the year, study, it's an application subject. We also like to acknowledge all these questions and memos. Other sources have been acknowledged in this presentation, but the questions and the memos have come from DBE past papers, something you should be working with. And thank you, DBE, for those papers. All the best, learners. Goodbye.